Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Talking About the Big Stuff podcast with Michael Cole and Matthew Cravat. I am Michael Cole.
And I am Matthew Cravat.
All right. So today we are going to be talking about voter rights and kind of, it doesn't have to specifically be the SAVE Act, although I do want to talk about the SAVE Act in this episode. Because it's something that's kind of big right now. It seems like a weird time to talk about voter rights because it's March 4th.
But they're trying to take them away, so it's a good time to talk about it.
Right, exactly.
But then they're always trying to take away voting rights.
Right. But this is a little bit bigger. Like, a lot of times they're trying to take them away on a state-by-state level.
Yeah, this is the federal taking away voting rights. Yeah. This is a poll tax is what it is, basically, too. The SAVE Act specifically it's a poll tax.
Yeah, so I heard, for listeners,
We'll have to listen to this in the future because it's probably not going to pass the Senate, so it'll probably never become a law.
I hope that you're right.
And the Senate didn't even take it up last year. They wouldn't even take it up because they need 60 votes, and they're not going to get Democrat votes on it, so they didn't even bother last time, so they won't.
So, at some point in the last week on, I don't know what I was watching or listening to, they were talking about the SAVE Act, and they were saying that the SAVE Act, let me read you the actual acronym for it. It is the
American Voting Experience.
Safeguard American Voter Eligibility Act, or the SAVE Act. It is specifically, it's basically a voter ID.
It's basically like usual, a solution
to a problem
that is only a conspiracy theory. Like that seems like the Republican laws these days are. I heard a conspiracy theory. Let's pass a law to stop the conspiracy theory. I heard.
Yeah. So.
And make everyone suffer. Like maybe somewhere an undocumented person risked 5 years in prison to cast a vote. Let's make everyone who votes have more difficulty to not even avoid that, because there's still, if someone's going through the trouble of risking prison, they'll go through the trouble of going around this law too.
Yeah. So two things. One is I just read the act. When I say read, I mean that, like, I as I was telling you before we started recording, I am not confident that I understand how a bill language works properly. So there were like pieces where is it an and or an or? I'm not sure. After reading it, there was so I had heard about it in the last week or so, someone saying that this act would, in addition to the things that we hear typically about voter ID, it would make it so that your ID has to match, your name on your ID has to match the name on your birth certificate.
That's an or, not an and.
Okay.
Kind of situation. Because what it is,
I was going to say, because reading through it, I did not see that language anywhere.
Right. You need to have proof of your citizenship in a federal way. So if you have a Real ID driver's license, the Real ID version, that does it. If you have a passport, that does it.
Yep.
If you don't have those two things, and like 10% of Americans don't, like 50% of Americans don't have a passport. But Real ID has been rolling out for years, so a lot of them have that. So, but let's say 10% or something of Americans don't have either one or something else federal, like a military ID that they can rely on. They need to, when registering, not voting, but registering or re-registering if they get kicked off the rolls for some reason, which Republicans love to do.
And there are pieces in here about how to remove people from the rolls.
Yeah. They want to knock people off rolls and make them re-register to make sure they live up to this. Yeah. So if you don't have one of those federal pieces, which you and I have passports, I know you travel internationally, I travel internationally, my family all has, so it doesn't affect us directly because we have that if we had to re-register. But some people don't. And if you're, say, my mom, and you don't drive, so you don't have a driver's license, and and your passport maybe is not up to date. I don't know if it expires. If you have to take a day to go to the DMV to get a Real ID, which right now in North Carolina, you can't, or at least in our area, you can't get an appointment. The appointments are 6 months out, or it goes out like until the end of how long you can make appointments, and there's no spaces. Like there's no place you can make an appointment to go. So
getting a passport can be a pain in the ass too. I did it last summer. It's a pain in the ass.
Yeah, and it costs money, and you need to get your birth certificate. So if you don't have a copy of your birth certificate, then what do you do? And so you have to contact the county where you were born and get it and pay to get copies of your birth certificate. So that's why I think it's a poll tax. You have to pay
Yep.
to get a real ID or a passport or your birth certificate to get one of those other things if you don't have them already. So somewhere you're paying money for the right to vote, which is not what you're supposed to have to do.
I want to put in a note real quick on what you're talking about, because I was thinking the same thing when I was reading it. There is a piece in here where it talks about if a state is investigating whether or not you should be removed from the voter rolls, they will be given information from the whatever board that this is creating, and it says specifically in there, at no cost to the state.
To the state.
So like, yeah. So they're like, we don't want to charge you guys to straighten this out, but we're going to charge the individuals.
Yeah, and I think it says that the state needs to come up with a process. Like it's putting on the state. Here's another thing for your plate. You're voting, which you already have a process. You have to come up with a new one that meets our criteria now. But so the problem with the name change that people have heard about and rightfully panicked a little bit about is if you're one of those people who says, well, the only thing that I have is my birth certificate, and then I have my regular driver's license or my school ID. So, you say you can't register with just your birth certificate because that's just a piece of paper, no picture, no proof it's you. So they say birth certificate plus a picture ID. And it could be a picture ID that would not otherwise qualify you to vote, like a school ID or a driver's license that's state, not real ID. Mm-hmm. But that's the case where if that picture ID, that current ID, does not have the same name as your birth certificate. So you changed your name at some point, either because you got married and took your spouse's name, or you changed your name because you're an actor and you wanted a new name, or you changed your name because you changed gender and want a new name, or you changed your name because you just felt like having a new name at some point for any reason under the sun and you changed your name.
Yeah.
You now have to have proof of your legal name change, in access with your current ID, with your birth certificate. It's this whole chain of things that do you have all that? You changed your name. I have a friend who is trans who changed her name in the 70s. Does she still have paperwork saying she did it in the 70s? I don't know.
Yeah.
And the concern is not that you can't do those things, because you can. You have to pay a little bit of money, but probably, that's not the biggest barrier in the world for the cross section of people who need to do some of that paperwork. Some people it might be a barrier, but say it won't for everyone. But it's a hassle for all those people. And how likely are they to say, you know what, I'm just not going to vote because it's too much of a hassle. Like I kicked off the rolls. It's going to take me 2 months to get paperwork together to get back on the rolls. Screw it. They don't want me. I don't want them. And that's the real key. Less people will vote. And that's what Republicans always want, because they do not believe in democracy, representative or otherwise.
Right. Yeah. So I appreciate you clarifying that in order to get these things, you need that, because I forget where I had heard it, they said, anybody who has changed their name will have an issue because it has to match, which I literally told Sarah, I'm like, you might have to change your name back.
It's an overstatement. That's for people who don't have a passport. Like Sarah has a passport, so she is not in danger. But there are certainly people that will run into that problem.
Right. Yeah. I remember when I went to vote in the 2004 election, which was my first presidential election.
I still think you were robbed. You should have won that.
Yeah. I went in to vote, and I was at college, and it was a temple right next to college was the voting place. Which it feels weird that in the separation of church and state you can vote in religious institutions. Like
it feels weird to me too.
It wasn't. I mean, they didn't do anything. Like as far as I know, like there's no issue there, and it's Massachusetts, so like my vote wouldn't have counted one way or the other there. But I went in.
Everyone says that can't be true. Like at some point, there's a critical mass of people need to vote for it to stay the color that it normally stays.
True. Yeah. So I went in and I got my license out to show it, just assuming you needed to, because I had voted 2 years earlier, but I didn't really remember the process. Mm-hmm. And the person doing the thing goes, "Oh, you don't need that." And I got my wisdom teeth out that day. So after I went and voted, I drove home. My dad took me to the dentist, and on the ride to the dentist, I said to my dad, "I didn't have to show my ID." And he goes, "Yeah." And you know, my dad's conservative, so he didn't. He's like, "They don't make you show ID. It's ridiculous. You have to show ID for everything else." And at the time, without any other information, that makes sense.
Right. Everything else isn't a legal right that you have.
Right.
That's why.
But also, like, the reasoning, like the idea of the poll tax, that's not explained ever. And anytime you bring it up with a conservative, they go like, "Who doesn't have an ID?" And like, this is a made up problem, and it's like,
my mom. That's my answer. Right. I have a problem. My mom. Here's your person. Though she probably has a non-driver's ID now, but it's still in general.
But also,
she had to get that. She had to go out and get that ID for things like this, and it wasn't free, and it didn't cost no time and effort on her part.
Right, and if she was trying to deal with that after this, if this act passed, if she was trying to deal with that, she's one of those people. Like, she's been a cravat for what, 60 years, 60-something years. So
hopefully more than that, because my brother's over that age. But yeah.
You know what I mean, though.
Yeah,
like it makes it tough, and so anyway, it. While I think that there is the obvious of just like we can just get people to not vote by this, it doesn't seem specifically as targeted as it was made to sound the other day. But there are other bills that on state levels. I want to say it was Georgia. I could be wrong. A few years ago, had a voter rights bill, and you had to have your name on your ID had to match the spelling exactly as the name on the voter roll, and that meant that you couldn't have apostrophes or hyphens in your name. And they were like, "This is very clearly trying to get black people to not be able to vote." You know. And especially in Georgia, if you can discount the black vote, you can change the state.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that worries me about the SAVE Act. I mean, don't worry me because I don't think it's going to pass. I think it's not going to get through the Senate, so I don't think it's really going to be a thing. But if it were to get through the Senate and become a law, there's a lot of stuff that is, like you mentioned earlier, like that goes down to the state. The state has to figure it out. And then you think like, well, some states are going to make it even more arduous. They're going to make it harder to do it for those fringe cases because less votes is what they like.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And at this point, it's less about securing the ability to win in the future and more about maintaining. Because they've been able to do this on a smaller scale in enough places.
Yeah, voter suppression is their strongest tool.
Yeah,
always, yeah.
And in a country where we are getting closer and closer to not being a democracy, and you worded it better earlier when you said or representative democracy, because conservatives love to make that argument.
Yeah. They have a dictionary. If you look up the word republic, it says a form of democracy, and you need to remind them that it is before they make that argument.
Right. So regardless of whatever version of democracy or thing that's closely associated with democracy, whatever you want to call it, if you're a conservative,
whatever flavor of democracy.
We are getting close to the point where none of that will be, potentially none of that could be potentially it could be that none of that is true, and this is another way of ensuring that until we get to the point where Vladimir Putin got 99.9.9.
I will say though, I agree with Donald Trump on one thing. He truthed out that if you're doing something to save the country, then it's not a crime. So if this country is in danger of losing its democracy and somebody does something, like a Secret Service agent who's standing around Donald Trump, does something to save our country, it's not a crime per Donald Trump. Who also said everything he says is a federal law. So,
wasn't that a Mussolini quote too?
It probably is. I mean, he doesn't write his own material.
No, it was Napoleon. I'm sorry. It was Napoleon. I'm pretty sure it was a Napoleon quote.
Little hands, little feet, whatever.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that they said it was Napoleon, which I don't know enough about Napoleon to know where he compares to Mussolini, but
the emperor who took over militarily.
Yeah. It's not as bad as when he had Mein Kampf as his
night table book. Yeah.
Although to be fair to him, it's not really nice to accuse him of having a book on his nightstand that he almost certainly couldn't read.
Like, no, I'm sure that he had parts that were flagged for him. Here are some good quotes you should use, because you saw it all the time.
You saw the British thing last past week, right? With the guy from England giving him a letter from King Charles. Did you not see that?
I don't think so.
So I forget who the guy was, but he hands Trump a letter from King Charles.
Henry Higgins, Professor Higgins, maybe.
Could be. I don't know. I never knew who this guy was. Henry Higgins from My Fair Lady. Yeah, I know who that. I just didn't know if there was an actual Henry Higgins. So anyway, Trump looks at the letter for a minute and he goes, "This is really nice. You should read it aloud to everybody," and hands it back. And I sent it to a bunch of people, but he does that, and then this black woman goes, "This motherfucker can't read."
What I would say is more likely is that Trump needs glasses to read and will not put glasses on and look older in front of people.
Sure.
He has to be able to read because he's done things that involve writing.
Yeah.
And reading and writing. Like he's been in depositions where he's had to read from things. I think it's hard for him to read without glasses, and he doesn't want to put on glasses because that would show weakness. And that's my guess. That's my personal guess. I don't have evidence of that, but I think it's more likely than he can't read.
Okay. I think that's probably true. I think that's probably correct. But anyway.
I'm giving you this one, Donnie. I'm giving you, you're vain, not illiterate.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think even he would deny that he's vain.
He probably thinks this pod is about him.
I mean, it has been too much. I wish that we could move on.
You're so vain. You probably think this podcast is about you.
Cool thing is that song is actually about me, so.
As well it should be.
Yeah. So, in addition to the SAVE Act and other voter suppression, other direct voter suppression legislation, there's a lot of indirect. I'm sure you are aware too, like there's places where it becomes illegal to hand out water to people waiting in line.
That's Georgia.
Yeah.
Because Atlanta
is it all Georgia?
Yeah, well, because they were the ones who were right on the edge of like they just barely lost the Senate. The Republicans just barely lost the Senate, the two Senate seats, and they were like, well, we reduced voting sites so much there were 12-hour waits, and the assholes stood online for 12 hours to vote. Who thought they would do that? And then people made it easy for them by bringing them food and drink. So we got to make that illegal. So it's hard to stand online for 12 hours after we force you to stand online for 12 hours.
Yeah. I saw a thing.
It's almost like they don't believe in a democracy, even a representative democracy.
Yeah. So
almost like that. Seems that way, weirdly.
I'm probably going to get the years wrong on what I'm about to say, but Stacey Abrams ran in 2018. I forget.
Maybe I don't know what year she ran.
She ran and lost relatively narrow. I don't think it was like a squeaker, but it was relatively narrow, and there had been a bunch of little things like that to affect the outcome, and it was voter suppression work.
Sites and drop off sites in white neighborhoods, not a lot in black neighborhoods.
Right, and so she complained or publicly stated that it was not a fair election, and then when Trump was doing it in 2020, people were saying like. And people that were defending Trump when people say, "Hey, he's just bitching about an election that he lost, that he genuinely lost," they're like, "Well, Stacey Abrams is doing the same thing." Which two things. Stacey Abrams was not already the governor. The guy who was
in charge of the
election is the guy who won governor, and B, like. We didn't have a federal thing in place to beat Trump, in addition to the fact that Trump was president already. like I think that
well, she also didn't have 35 fake lawsuits on made up things You know, and she had an actual description of what she was claiming actually happened, rather than, oh, this state, how did I lose there? Oh, in this state it was this. Oh, this state, oh, in this state it was that. And like,
can you just find the amount of votes I need?
Yeah.
But you know, and then I think she ran
in Georgia.
Yeah. It all comes back to Georgia.
Georgia, sweet Georgia, all comes back.
Then you, I think that Stacey Abrams lost 4 years later in the governor race again, and then I think she won. She lost more clearly, and people were like, "How come it's okay for her to be a sore loser?" Which I don't know this situation the second time. This first time there was a lot of shit. Second time,
was she a sore loser? I mean, she complained that people are suppressed, but don't think she said it was a lie or a cheat or not, or she really won. She's like, she formed, she had one of the best and the most effective voter sign up drives, which in North Carolina they're trying to make it illegal, by the way, to do voter registration drives. That organizations can't help register people because, amazingly enough, they don't seem to want people to be registered to vote.
Yeah. Did you hear that, Georgia? North Carolina's coming for that spot as the worst voting state.
We're the ones when you're not allowed to help someone get registered. You're not allowed to have they're not there yet, but it is a bill that is working its way through the General Assembly that will certainly pass because Republicans, and will be vetoed by the governor because Democrat, but then might get overturned. Like, they don't have a supermajority to automatically overturn, but if they're sneaky enough and shitty enough and do it when somebody's out of the office and, or sick, or like they did it for the budget one time when they waited for 9/11, said we're not having sessions today so we can all go to 9/11 memorials. And then Democrats went to 9/11 memorials and the Republicans all ran into the room and voted.
Yeah.
So they'll find some way to make it happen.
I think it's disgusting.
Have we talked on the pod about the Supreme Court case election? I don't remember what we talk about here and what we don't. The North Carolina Supreme Court case for Allison Riggs versus...
Yeah, we did an episode kind of about it. Yeah,
so let's just, while we're talking about voting, the other way that Republicans, for those who didn't hear it and don't know the case, the other way the Republicans screw it is we had it's March. We had an election in November, and one race is not decided because the Republican who clearly lost despite multiple recounts is trying to sue to say, how about we just don't count the votes for 60,000 people? Then maybe I'll win.
Yep, yeah.
And it's been through multiple cases. He lost multiple times, but he's still appealing because he hopes to get up to the Supreme Court, which is mostly Republicans. Except for like Allison Riggs, there's two Democrats, and one of them is the person in the case, so she would have to recuse herself. So there'd only be one Democrat here in the case.
Yeah. And if they do, if they get rid of if they are able to do some more of that, the voter suppression stuff, when we were talking about with getting rid of voter registration, what the fuck are you doing?
What? Nothing, just listening to you.
If they get rid of the voter, I can't look. If they get rid of the voter registration drives, then next time, I can never remember his name. What is not Riggs? The other one, the guy that's running against
Jefferson
Riggs.
Griffin.
Jefferson Griffin.
Could he sound more like a redneck Confederate soldier?
No. Yeah.
Jefferson Griffin refuses to accept his loss to a woman.
Yeah. But he could win outright next time. Instead of not
losing by 735 votes.
Yeah. One thing I do want to say. So when I was looking up for this episode, looking up the SAVE Act, which I have not really looked up at, bills and stuff before. It is super fucking easy to see them. Not easy to read them necessarily, but it's easy to find them.
And it comes up.
Yeah, but like the legal, like the legit, like I'm on congress.gov.
Yeah, just Google
so
it. You don't have to listen to somebody else.
Yeah.
Which is like I see a lot of that in videos and people, Republicans talking about, Democrats are voting against the bill that gets rid of taxes on tips and on overtime. And then like Democrat responses are like, what bill are you talking about? There's no such bill. The Republican budget does not do that. You can just, get the bill and look at it, Control F and look for the word, tax.
it's harder to prove something that doesn't exist because it could just not be there. You know, it's like Matthew. If I accuse you of murdering somebody in the summer of 1993, and I don't tell you who, it can be real difficult for you to prove that you didn't kill somebody in the summer of '93. Now, if I throw a name out there, you can be like, well, here is that person still alive. But
Sorry, I need to attach a power source because what I thought was powering my computer is not.
It's okay. Anyway, so
suddenly everything got dim, and I realized that's not a good sign.
Yeah. So anyway, that's that's the Republican playbook. It's just like, oh, if we just throw it out there, it's hard to find something that doesn't exist to disprove us.
Mm-hmm.
So, as atheists, we are very aware of that.
Something I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it.
It's like every time I've ever watched
God exists, prove it doesn't.
Every time I watch a Matt Dillahunty debate and someone's like, the burden of proof is on you, I'm like, oh, poor bastard. But all right,
burden of proof is on the person who doesn't believe the thing. Then how about this? Your God was real. He died yesterday. Prove he didn't.
Yeah.
Or my other favorite is, God is real. I'm God. Burden of proof is on you to prove I'm not.
Yep. Anyway, I will include this bill. I'm sorry, I've been losing my voice for like a month now. Like I've had this like stupid
demand a recount.
Yeah, I will going to include this bill in the show notes because I think that it's good that people have access to it. I think one of the things that I really want to do this year that you and I have talked about a bit is I want to help people be informed. I want to be more informed in a way that I think is like we can all listen to pundits and we can do all these things, but like these more actionable, specific ways, like knowing about shit.
Yeah, it's good to look it up because, when you hear people on the other side say batshit crazy things, they heard it from someone and they believed it. So you have to take a step back and say, well, why do I trust the sources I'm listening to when maybe my source is the batshit crazy one? And in the case of the SAVE Act, there certainly are people out there saying married women can't vote because they changed their name, and that's not accurate. There is misinformation on both sides.
Yeah,
it tends to be I think the source on the left tends to be a mistake, but then people take that mistake as gospel when they hear someone else say it. Versus on the right, I think it's an intentional lie that people take as gospel without researching. So, but the end person who just believes what he was told is the same in both cases. They just believe what they were told. You're just lucky if you were told the right thing, not the wrong thing.
Yep. You also, like, when you do this, you can kind of see, like, so, we talk about the person who is typically a woman, but a person who's married who's changed their name, or a trans person who's changed their name, or just a random person who's chosen. Yeah. When we heard that is not pulled out of nowhere.
Right. It's just a misunderstanding of the details.
Misinterpretation of a detail. Yeah, exactly. Which is different than...
As opposed to... Zelensky started the war.
Yeah. Well, and 2 years ago, my mom and I were on the phone, and she told me this story that she saw on Fox News about a guy sexually assaulting a little kid in a
fucking priests.
No, it wasn't. In a gym locker room, and they got away with it because they were so fat that their penis wasn't visible. Like it was just like flashing, like that's the assault. And I was like, I'm driving while I'm talking to my mom, and I was like, Mom, does that sound right to you? And she goes, like, it could happen. I'm like, no, that doesn't sound like it could happen. Like, that sounds ridiculous. And I'm like, and I'm driving, I'll look it up when I get home, but like, that sounds ridiculous. I go home, I put Logan to bed because I think Sarah was away for business or something. I put Logan to bed, and I'm like, I gotta Google this.
Business.
Yeah. I go on and I start Googling like random details that she had told me, and I can't fucking find it anywhere. And I finally, I'm like, let me Google let me go to like Fox
Yeah.
or like look
Tell
up
me where you
Fox
know
News.
it came from, right?
And then you can get names, and then you can get clarification. So finally, I find it on Fox or Newsmax or one of these stupid ones, and the article comes up, and I find it, and I'm like, okay, this is what they said. Here's the name of the person. Finally got the name of the person. Let me Google the story so I can see an alternate version of the story from a CBS or whatever. It was a trans person who was in a gym locker room. And the reason that they were found not guilty is because they were in a corner wrapping the towel, making sure that nobody was seeing them because they didn't want to disturb anybody by getting changed in the locker room. And they said, well, they were very intentionally not showing everybody their genitals, which in a locker room you see people's genitals, but I get it. Like,
That's why I go to locker rooms.
yeah. And then it said that the person who made the complaint was like, "Why are you in here? Why are you in here?" They were harassing them, and then I also looked it up in the entire article, including quotes from the judge, quotes from the lawyers. There was nothing about this trans person's weight. That was just like the thing that they said they couldn't see the penis because the towel was up.
So somebody made up a reason at some point along the line.
Why couldn't you see
Somebody
the
didn't know
penis?
about
Well,
the
we
towel
saw her
made up a reason.
mugshot. We saw her mugshot, and she's kind of fat. By the way, she was not as fat as me.
I mean, obviously.
And my penis is visible when I'm naked, or so I've been told. I can't see it, but other people can. But so like I remember seeing that, and I emailed it to my mom, and she said, instead of like reading it, she goes, "So what did it say?" And I was like, "This is not true." And she goes, "There was no person flashing somebody." I'm like, and I explained it. She wasn't going to read the article, so I was like, "Okay, here's the highlights of the difference." And she goes, "Okay, so like she didn't see the difference in what I was saying versus what Fox was saying, which was crazy to me." And then I said, "Imagine I described to you a movie in which this woman kills another woman, and then she goes on a trip with 3 friends and kills that first woman's sister, and it is gory and disgusting and horrifying." I said, "That's a scary movie, right?" And she goes, "Yeah." I'm like, "That's The Wizard of Oz."
That's what it's about, yeah.
And I said, "That's what Fox News does. Fox News takes the plot of The Wizard of Oz and makes it this miserable teenage girl goes on a fucking killing spree." I said, "That's what they're doing to you." And she was like, "I guess I don't," and I'm like, and my mom doesn't even watch Fox News that much. She's typically in the room when my dad's watching it.
Yeah. And just to be fair to people listening, Bill Maher does the same exact thing on the left.
Oh, for sure.
Well,
Bill Maher is not really the left. Bill Maher is like, he's like pro marijuana and like center.
I mean, he gave $1 million to Obama's campaign. He was he considers himself on the left. He's just super moderate compared to not even compared to the whole party. He's probably the average. He's probably aligned with most people on the left who are not politically aware and not like into politics. They just vote left, and he's just a voice.
But this is his thing.
Yeah. I'm saying he's just he's a middle person.
That's what he told Bill Burr when Bill Burr, he said, "Well, this isn't your thing about politics," and he was like, "It's your thing." He's like, "You're like some Monday morning quarterback."
You're a stand-up comic who's done a show about politics for a long time. That's all you are.
Yep.
And you weren't the best stand-up comic, and you did a couple of movies, and they're the worst movies ever made.
I literally don't even know what movies he's done.
Nothing good.
Yeah. So the other thing about this bill that is interesting, and
he did have a good line though. I'll give you Bill Maher's best line ever. Best line. That Bill Maher talked about how he's half Jewish, half Catholic, and he goes, so it showed in times because I'd go to confession, and I'd be like, "Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned." You know my lawyer, Mr. Solomon.
You cut out right at the punchline.
Oh, damn you, gods!
I'll have to hear it in editing. A lot of times when I'm editing, I'm like, "Oh, that was good. That was good."
And if you give us some money on Patreon.com, you can hear the jokes that cut out too.
Yeah. So here's the other thing, not about the bill specifically, but about finding the bills on here. You can see who the people are that introduced the bill.
Yep.
They're all listed. There's like lots of information here that can help you. So, and in some of the cases, seemingly not all of them, and I'm not sure why, it will say what state, for example. So there's Mrs. Miller of Illinois, Mr. Crenshaw, who is Dan Crenshaw Oklahoma or Texas?
I do not know.
You know who it is, though, right?
I'm familiar with the guy.
Yeah. So he's one of the 2 or 3 names that I recognize. That's why I said that. But his state isn't specifically said. But some of the states are. So anyway, the point being, you can go if you hear about a bill, you can make sure that you're well informed on it. You can go find the exact wording, which is not always the easiest to read, and sometimes that's on purpose. And then you can see like, oh, is my congressperson or
Yeah, if it's something that's been voted on already, you can pull up the voter records and see with every person voted. And my wife and I were talking about this earlier today. The media is doing a really crappy job of covering the resistance at a political level, like what the Democrats in office are doing. And they've never done a good job of telling you, except for like AOC and Bernie, they don't tell you what's happening with people who aren't from your area. Like you can go here in the Raleigh-Durham area and go to the Raleigh News Observer and see what your congresswoman or congressman is doing, but you're not going to see what's happening in Tennessee or in Chicago, or anywhere else. So like if there's people you want to see what they're doing, you need to like seek it out yourself. I follow my congresswoman and my previous congresswoman on Instagram, so I see their press releases because they show pictures of their press releases. I see where Representative Fushi has been going on protests. I don't see it anywhere else. I don't watch the local news really, and I don't read a local newspaper. So it's my fault. I just don't do those things. So the only way I know what my person is doing is by following them and see what they're doing. So it does take a little bit of activity on your own part to track what your people are doing.
But I also think that
they're not doing anything. It's like just because you don't notice, maybe they're not, but maybe they are, and you just don't know it. They're not in charge, so they can't pass a law.
Right. Yeah, and I think there's just a lot of benefit to being able to just see the thing without a pundit's interpretation of it, because not to say that a pundit isn't helpful in some cases. Like I like Sam Cedar from the Majority Report. I watch that show, and sometimes I feel like I'm getting a lot of information and a lot of things that are getting broken down in a way I can understand. But I also think that like looking at this, like. I forget where it was that I heard that, but I immediately, upon reading it, was like, I'm not seeing anything that makes it sound like everybody.
Some of it you have to piece it together, and I get people pieced together wrong. Like you're saying, the weirfars and the warfars, and what's an and and what's an or. You have to figure out. And so my breakdown of it came from watching multiple people whom I respect and trust, including some interviews with Democratic representatives saying, here's my problem. I read the thing, and it seems to me that some people, and then seeing things like PolitiFact and stuff showing a left-wing rant about, oh my God, I can't vote because I'm married, and saying, we rate that as mostly false. Here's the situation, and like breaking it down. So you got to find those impartial ones that you do trust. Like I love the, it was prosecuting Donald Trump, and now it's, I forgot the Maine Law, maybe. I forget the name of it, but it's a MSNBC sponsored podcast that's 2 law professors, and they're very open and honest. Like they say their opinion, but they're also like, this is actually legal, even though it sucks. This is like they don't skew anything. They try to give the most accurate facts they can. They're law school professors. They don't want to. They do it correctly while giving their opinion, but they also say which is the fact and which is the opinion.
Yeah. Also, and this I'm going to say something that is extremely irresponsible for a second.
Really?
You look at I know, right? You can look at like on these, you can look at all the co-sponsors, and I actually found a list on their website where it's more defined. You can see what state and what district number and stuff. You can look at that, and even if you don't understand the wording of the thing, I see Nancy Mace, Dan Crenshaw, Paul Gozer, and I all of a sudden have a pretty good idea how I feel about this bill.
If it's not bipartisan, you certainly have an idea one way or the other. Things sometimes too.
Oh, that's a good point too. Yeah, I'm looking and I don't see a single
Then you can even think within the party, is it the far left or the far right of either of the parties, by the people, and to give you another idea of maybe gives me a hint of how I should read it. Though, I mean, I don't think you should totally poison the well with,
no.
just because somebody said something. But, once you list it in like everyone is an extremist who's supporting it, something's wrong.
Right. And in this case, it was just a real quick scroll, but I'm almost positive I didn't see a single Democrat. And that's not, there are things where I could see that being okay. And I could be like, I could, but I would definitely double check if a bill came forward that sounded good to me and it was all Republicans, that's even more reason why I want to double check. Now, if it said like it was, 300 people co-sponsored it and it's 50% Republican, 50% Democrat, well, it's probably like either it's pretty good or it's just got a little bit of something for everybody and it's nothing super offensive.
It could be the TikTok ban where they didn't tell us why they're voting the way they're voting. I suspect they had a good reason, but they wouldn't tell us what it is.
Or it could be like a super, like the budget stuff. Like there's all kinds of budget pieces that
the things that we don't care about
right
and
over
probably should just go through there, which way of doing business.
Yeah. Yep.
And those are things that should have good bipartisan support. Only the wackos should not be on that.
Yeah. All right. I think we're done with the SAVE Act. Is there any other voter rights stuff that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before probably, but I'll say it again. It's important ahead of an election, not like last minute, but like, primaries are coming up at a certain thing, in March of next year. By January, go to, search your state and voter lookup, and find the actual state page where you can look yourself up and make sure you are actively registered to vote. I know you voted last time. I know you planned on voting, but make sure you weren't kicked off the rolls. They have lots of dishonest ways to it and lots of just, government bureaucracy. There could just be a dink in the system and you get knocked off. Like you don't vote for 2 municipal elections in a row, and then when the big election comes, you think you're going to vote and you can't because that was their cutoff that you didn't vote for the municipal, or they sent a postcard to your house and you didn't reply to it, whatever, and they took you off the roll. So it's worth double checking with enough time to register.
Oh, for sure. This, but the audience doesn't know this. But
I was talking to the audience.
I moved 5 or 6, almost 6 years ago. And I did not re-register. I double-checked that I was registered still, and must have been from changing my license or whatever. Somehow, it has the right address on there, but I never filled that out. But like I could see the opposite happening very easily, where you don't, like I moved 2 streets over. Nothing.
I know. I helped move furniture.
Nothing. Yeah. Nothing.
That's how we roll, podcast listeners.
Yeah. Nothing changed with my district or my school board. Like literally, I'm in the same development. I was just renting, and now I own, or Sarah owns.
You?
Yeah, she's my sugar mama. But I can see easily, like, if you're in an area where you're like, I moved 2 streets over because it was just better, but I want to keep my kid in the same school, it could completely slip your mind. And you won't have the luck that I had where it just somehow magically changed my registration over.
Yeah, and it might not be a big deal because maybe nobody would notice. Maybe you're in the same district and things. But they just might send postcards out to confirm that you're still where you are. And if you don't get that reply back, you might come off the rolls.
I probably did see the postcard or whatever and go, oh, I need to. I don't remember doing it, but I probably did. So, but the point being, yeah, you could move and it could affect you in no other way.
Or it just could be a mistake on the rolls that you got knocked off the rolls. Mistakes happen, so double check. We always double check. Our house, we never miss an election. Like, every little thing for town council and nothing else, we're voting. So, so we always double check because you never know. And it's never happened to us. Like, I'm not being a fear monger saying it's going to happen because it's never happened to me, but it could. And you don't want to find that out on election day.
Right. Yeah. All right. Should we start wrapping?
When you talked about being surprised you didn't need voter ID when you were younger and voting.
Yeah.
I know before we had voter ID in North Carolina because the Republicans started suppressing the vote. My brother lived here for a while in Apex, and then he moved back to California. And when I'd go and I'd give them my name, I would see my brother's name on the rolls for years afterwards. And I would say, he doesn't live here. Like, take him off the rolls. And he didn't, he left the state. So like, they don't know he re-registered somewhere else because he didn't re-register in North Carolina. And he just been on the rolls forever. Not forever, but for a long time. And I was like, can you give me a form? Is there something I could tell him to do? Before I finally him stop being on the rolls.
Yep. I like using that as an example of what I consider. I don't have a good term for it, but I was a Republican at that point in my life, or a conservative. I don't think I was ever registered as a Republican, but I voted Republican, and I, in the last 20 years, since in the process of growing and changing and learning more, I realized that a lot of Republican talking points and everything else are compelling if you don't know the opposite argument. And that's the number one example that I always come to is like, if you don't hear why voter ID is an issue, it makes 100% sense until, it's...
If you're someone who has an acceptable ID, you assume, well, everyone has it because I do.
Right.
The thing is, like, your son is young enough that you have not had the pleasure of going to the DMV 3 weeks in a row because they didn't get to you, or one of your pieces of paperwork wasn't the right one, so you had to leave and come back another day. So, like, it's not even a matter of, you just have to, one afternoon go to the DMV. It could take 4 afternoons if they're very nitpicky about paperwork. The reason you're going is that you don't have good ID. You definitely could be screwed when you get there and don't have the right documents.
Same thing with the passport. We went to one post office that had like a passport office in there, and they were like, well, you need an appointment and they're not open this day of the week. And we're like, it doesn't say that anywhere on the website. And they were like,
phone number. There's a phone. It's not even online. At least when I did mine in 2017, it wasn't even online. I had to call a phone number to make an appointment.
Yeah. And then they told us about another one that was open that day. So we drove. I like cut out of work for the day, basically. I was trying to do it on my lunch break. And then I was like, I'm just not going to be able to get back to work. So I'll just take a half day. We drove up to behind, all those dealerships on the other side of the airport, up where Angus Barn is. Like, we drove past there. There's a post office in the middle of fucking nowhere. Also, by the way, what do you say because I found out when I moved down here that up in Massachusetts, we say East Buttfuck or East Bumfuck.
Bumfuck Egypt.
And they all say Bumfuck Egypt down here.
BFE.
Weird.
Bumfuck
Yeah. I was taking notes in a meeting at my last job at one point, and someone wrote BFE. And I afterwards, I'm like, what is BFE? Because I don't know that acronym. And they were like, Buttfuck Egypt. I'm like, oh, I thought it was because when you're in corporate, it's like acronym. And I was like,
okay, pause. Acronym story. Somebody pinged me on Teams. Can I video chat you? And I wrote back, because I worked for a French company, for so many years. And a couple seconds go by, then he calls me and he goes, I'm sorry, Matthew. What does the acronym OUI stand for again? The French word for So later in the call, I said, bonjour, mon ami. And he goes, what? Like, what do those words mean? I'm like, bonjour, like good day, like my friend. Like, this is not complicated French.
No, I know.
And I told a coworker about it, and later, like a day or two later, whatever, the same person messaged him, can I video chat you? And he told me, I stopped, I turned and looked over my shoulder at you because you were behind me, gotta do it. And I typed we. And then when he called me, he was just laughing his ass off, and he's like, you were talking to Cravat, weren't you?
Yep. That's funny.
Okay, I'm paused.
All right, so we were, there was this place up in Buttfuck, Egypt, and it was I actually thought it was like this. It was so hidden, and then we waited there for like 3 hours, the three of us, and we, and then you don't know when you're waiting there. You think you have all the paperwork, and you're not entirely positive until they put the stamp, and they're like, "You're good to go," and you're like, "Oh, thank God."
So I had when I was getting my passport, it was when I started working at the MRU, and like a couple months in, they go, "Oh, by the way, I want you to go to France with me in 2 months. Do you have a passport?" I'm like, "No." What? Where? Like, yeah, we're going to go to France. And they said, you have enough time to get your passport regular. If something goes wrong, we'll pay for expediting it if you need to do it, whatever.
Expedition.
But you should be able to do it, by yourself. So I look online, see what I need. I get my shit together. I go to Roxborough, North Carolina, so up further out north of Durham, figuring it won't be a busy post office. I can get it done there more easily, and it's not that far from work, really. So I go there to do it on a work day, and woman's looking through my stuff, and she goes, "This is not a birth certificate." And I was like, "What?" And my birth certificate, which was this black document with reverse white type that I've had since 1967, she shows me on it where it says not, just a copy, not official. And I'm like, this is all I've ever had. And I've had a passport when I was younger. So this is what I use. This is what my mother has had since I was born. It's what they gave her in the hospital. I never had anything else. And she's like, well, it clearly says it's not your actual birth certificate. This was what they gave her at the hospital. She was supposed to get a real one, by mail or whatever. But she goes, I'll process it for you. You say it worked once before. I'll process it for you. But get a real birth certificate. If they bounce it back, then you can do expedited and get it. Mm-hmm. So I reached out to New York, ordered like 5 copies of my birth certificate, so I'd have extras. While I'm doing it, might as well have them. And waiting for them to come in, and like they came in, and the next day my passport came with the old not a birth certificate, coming back. They send it back to you. They send, and I'm like, well, they took it, and maybe because it's so old that they know it's real. Because why would I fake this falling apart document?
Yep.
But I now have a real passport and a real birth certificate, multiple copies.
Nice. I
think we did the same thing. We had to get my dad's after he died. There were things we needed his birth certificate for, so we had to reach out and get his birth certificate. When I got my mom's while we were at it, said might as well have it.
Did I ever tell you about when I worked at Verizon? I got a woman came in one day. I was 23-ish. Woman comes into the office, into the store, and she's like, I want to cancel my husband's phone. And I was like, oh, what's the matter? Why do you want to cancel it? She goes, he died. And I was like, oh, okay, because it was under contract still. And I was like, let me find out what the process is. So hold on one second. So I go ask the manager, I'm like, what do I do? And he goes, you got to get a death certificate. I'm like, okay. So I walk over to her and I'm like, do you have a death certificate? And she just starts crying. And I was like, I'm sorry, I need a death certificate. And she goes away, and I go over to the manager. I'm like, I'm never fucking doing that again. Like, and the manager goes, I was joking. I was like, what? And he goes, technically,
like when I went to Verizon, we didn't need it for the phone.
Yeah.
For my mother, but her home phone internet was under Verizon also. And or AT&T, sorry, not Verizon, AT&T, and for that we would have needed it because they couldn't get it. That's not something they're able to turn off because we say turn it off. Like the phone I could turn off, but I couldn't turn off her other stuff because what if she's not dead? What if I'm just lying?
Yeah,
they needed proof that I wasn't making it up.
Yeah, so this was a policy that they needed it to break the contract.
Yeah.
But he was like, I don't give a shit if you do that or not. He was just fucking with me to tell me to go do it.
Well, and fucking Massachusetts people are assholes. Because fucking with you is fine, but clearly you're going to say it to a widow.
Yeah, yeah, and an old lady too. She was probably
makes it a little better.
Pushing 90. Like
makes it a little better, I guess, except for the stress. Well, I'm saying, like my mom is handling my father's death a lot better than my coworker whose husband just in his 50s randomly died recently. Like it's expected. She's stressed with all the shit and hoops she's got to jump through, but she's not like, I'm so surprised he's gone. Like, that's not as bad.
But also, and I don't know your coworker's situation, but your mom watched your dad suffer for a couple of years at least.
Yeah. My coworker had been, not in years, but he'd been recently sick with some problems they could not diagnose. He was going doctor to doctor, hospital to hospital, but there was no expectation he was going to die. Like
right.
Specialists they were going to. Finally, we found someone. This is going to be taken care of. And while I was at my grandmother's, my mother-in-law's funeral, he died. So my boss had to have both of her employees lose someone at the same time.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just like if I dropped dead of a heart attack, Sarah would be more distraught than somebody who watches their person deteriorate.
Right.
What did you say?
Nothing.
Excited.
Ecstatic.
Oh, ecstatic. Sarah, did I not? Sarah. So I wrote a story before I met you. I wrote a story
About me?
It's essentially about me and Sarah, but it's a fictionalized version of us. And in the story, the guy dies, but he's like 90 something. And when Sarah read the story, she bawled her fucking eyes out. And I was like, why are you crying? It's like a sweet story that I wrote. Like, it's literally a story about this guy and his wife they love to travel, and they're always planning these trips. And essentially he plans a trip with his lawyer and pays for has everything's good to go, so that when he dies, his whole family goes on this trip to spread his ashes. It's one last trip, and it's like his dream destination that he was always worried would never live up to it. He doesn't have to see that it doesn't live up to it. His family goes. But he's in the story. He's like got grandkids, if not great grandkids, and she was crying, and I'm like, Sarah, and she goes, I just don't want to imagine you dying. I'm like, when I get to my 90s, I'll be ready to fucking die.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, I was 30 something. I'm like, I'm 30 something, and I am ready to fucking die. She's downstairs. I can't say that too loud. Mm-hmm. That's why it'll be for patrons. No, she doesn't listen to the podcast.
I don't blame her. Either do I. I'm always surprised when my friends do. Like, so, I spent time with Mikey this weekend, and he and spoke to his daughter, and they're both talking about things in the pod, and I'm like, oh yeah, I did talk about that. Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah. All right, so let's wrap things up. I'm hungry.
Okay. So hey, podcast listener, don't listen for a second. I'm not talking to you. Podcast viewer, come here. If you're watching this on the videos, right? You're on the YouTubes. Do me a personal favor. Like the video. You've been listening all this long. This is the end. You made it this far. You got to like the video, right? Right? Go ahead and make a comment. Something we said sparked a thought in your head that you would like to start a conversation about. Go ahead and down in the comment section, make a comment. Participate a little bit. Go read a bill and tell us how much you liked reading your friend Bill. I know you don't really care about every single episode, but we do this live. If you hit the notification bell, you'll get notification that we're about to go live. And if you're not doing nothing, you can watch.
That's only for patrons.
Shut up. I'm working here. Ring the damn bell so you'll know when videos go live. Because we got a producer, and he's gonna start cutting videos up into pieces at some point, so little bits and pieces will go up. What a beautiful thing! You can go watch the videos. You're gonna love them. But if you're not a video watcher, start watching the video. Go to YouTube right now. Find us talking about the big stuff. Like the channel. Subscribe to the channel. Go back to past videos and make comments. It ain't gonna hurt you. And if you are insistent that you are an ear hole person, only stay away from my eye holes, I got nothing for you.
If you are an ear hole person, I don't like that. I do not like that term. If you're a listener and not a viewer, give us a 5-star or a thumbs up or whatever your podcast app allows you to do. Comments, reviews, whatever. And if you are wanting to do more than that, you could go on to patreon.com/talking about the big stuff. And we have 3 tiered options as to how you can support us financially. You can also subscribe on there for free, and
4 tiers.
You'll get it. It's the third.
It's the lowest
tier. It's the lowest tier. Just comes out on the same day for everybody, as opposed to early. But it's a good way of knowing if there's anything special going on there, is to subscribe. So that's patreon.com/talking about the big stuff. Patreon.com/talking about the big stuff. I gotta say it like 9 times is what the practice.
You gotta say patreon.com/talking about the big stuff.
Yeah, I gotta say patreon.com/talking about the big stuff.
People will remember it if you say patreon.com/talking about the big stuff often enough.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the hope. So yeah, there's as little as $1 a month, not $1 an episode, $1 a month. I feel like
I should play Enya in the background when you say, for as little as $1 a month, you can support a podcaster.
Yeah, an unemployed podcaster and a employed podcaster, but
who would like to retire from his job and do creation of content full time.
Yeah.
You, listener, you can make that dream a reality by pledging only $250,000 an episode for the two of us to split.
We got to pay Alex too. So
do we really have to?
$250,000 might cover you and Alex, and then I only need.
But if we could retire,
I need like 35 grand. I need like 35 grand after that because I don't
Alex isn't here. If I can, if someone gives us 220, not in a year, but an episode, I'll let it
a month. We just need $200,000 a month, and we can probably live off that.
And I'll cut Alex a check myself for $35.50 a week.
Anyway, patreon.com/talking about the big stuff, and you can support us financially. You can go on there and check out all the options and stuff. There's some really cool stuff. That is where we do live stuff, which is cool because on rare occasions where we have viewers on the live stream, we will talk to them. I cut most of the live references out of the
so you won't even know what you're missing because you're missing it.
Yep. All right. Matthew, you got anything else?
No, I just want to say thanks for sticking around this long, listening to us talk about the big stuff, because the vote you save may be your own.
Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. It's just the beginning. If you have thoughts or questions or topics you'd like us to tackle in a future episode, drop us a line on our social media channels. Engage with this video when you are now watching it as a VOD on YouTube. Send us an email. We love hearing from our listeners, bringing us topics, because if you leave it up to the three of us, we're going to eventually be talking about underwater basket weaving. So we would appreciate you guys reaching out a little bit. Don't forget to subscribe to Talking About the Big Stuff on your favorite platform. Give us a 5-star rating. Engage with it. Criticize us. We need to grow and be better, and you're going to help us be there. You're going to help us get to that point. It really helps us more to reach out and also to keep the conversation going. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back next week with more big ideas and more thought-provoking discussions. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and keep talking about the big stuff.
The preceding podcast has been a Chocolate Diamond Media LLC production. Copyright 2023, all rights reserved.